Yo, welcome to the show. I'm Bret, and this is YouTube. Or LinkedIn if you're watching on LinkedIn. We're dual streaming today. I'm excited to talk about Docker. We got our friend Michael Irwin on the show, but here's a couple of quick announcements. The first one is, well, Nirmal's not here, as you will probably notice in a few minutes. Nirmal is traveling the world as the AWS megastar that he is. And we will, I don't know if we're going to see him in a couple of weeks or not. We were actually just chatting last night about when he will be back in the studio, or if we could even find a dark corner of a hotel room somewhere that he can just turn on his camera and go live with us. But we do have some podcast episodes coming up. If you are a fan of our podcast, let me at least show you what I'm talking about. Did you know I have podcasts? Okay, so this show will be on the DevOps and Docker Talk podcast. So yes, it's on YouTube forever, but we also edit this down into an audio and video podcast now. This is like an 8-year or 8-year running podcast. I think, we're about to hit 200 episodes, and we talk about Docker and DevOps and all that stuff on here. So look for that in your podcast player or here on YouTube. Thank you, Christy, my editor, for constantly, letting us not be awesome at this, and he still makes us look better on the edited versions. We also have a new podcast we launched last year called Agentic DevOps, so you can look that up, agenticdevops.fm, and we are launching what I'm going to call season 2. We had a 6-month break while basically we were all heads down, neck deep in AI crazy town, and as well as gas town, and there's just so much going on. There's so much to talk about. So we're basically going to catch you up. We've got a couple of episodes launching this month, and I'm excited to get more into what's happening to DevOps because of AI. That's basically what this podcast is about. You can also see those episodes here on YouTube on this channel. If you haven't heard, I announced, 8 months ago? Has it been that long? I think I announced 8 months ago this course that was supposed to be built and it's supposed to be all finished. Well, the problem is when things are constantly changing, how do you ever finish a course? So this is a course you can still sign up for. It is, we have technically launched it in preview to people already on the wait list. They have an opportunity to buy into this course. If you're interested at all in using the latest features of GitHub Actions, I am all in on GitHub Actions. That's what I teach. That's what I consult on. And oh, by the way, if you're looking for a DevOps consultant for AI in your GitHub Actions, give me a shout. Find me on the internet somewhere. I'm doing all that stuff now, and I have been for years focused more and more on helping teams adapt the latest GitHub automations, essentially, and now we're all throwing AI into it. So that's the new thing. So this I've been talking about to you on this podcast and on all my live streams every Thursday for 8 months now. But what we've done is, if you're on this wait list already, and over 800 of you already are, This, by the way, all these links are in the show notes or in the description, but I will put them in chat. And don't forget to like the stream. See, Cliff Dive is doing my marketing for me. Don't forget to like the stream. Like and subscribe, like everyone says here. And then lastly, I just want to kind of announce to you that you may not even be aware of this, because if you weren't on that wait list for that course, you did not know the sneaky soft launch we did of this new membership program. So I am actively onboarding new people every week to this. And this is a yearly membership program that essentially gets you weekly meetups, multiple courses that I'm building at the same time. And you're getting lectures as they're made, as they drop. And you're getting a bunch of resources around how to use AI in your operations, infrastructure, DevOps engineering. So this is everything from AI 101, what's the difference between Cursor and Claude Code, that kind of stuff, all the way up to what's the best models right now, what models should I be using for backend, for front end, for DevOps work, that sort of stuff. And then getting into the higher level stuff, which is, how do I take these LLMs and this AI and put them in my CI or my automation without them hallucinating crazy things and taking down my infrastructure? How do I do that work safely? What are the areas where we're actually seeing real business productivity benefits and not just hype, right? So that's what that's all about. So I'm just calling it the Agentic DevOps Guild, or the Guild. No, not that guild. That's a YouTube channel that all of us LARPers like to watch and D&D do stuff. But that's an old show. This is not that. But the Guild is something where we're meeting every week, and we've already had our first meetup. This was the first week of the meetups, and we are going to start doing those. We're alternating days. So if you are, depending on where you are in the world, we're going to have one late day Wednesday, one early day Tuesday, to try to get everybody coming in. And essentially the idea with the meetups is to give you the play-by-play as things are being built, but also answering questions and improving your productivity really in AI before I have lectures to provide you answers. And so one of the things that this group is already doing is the guild members are driving where the content goes based on what their problems are today. So we're going to be building out stuff. You can see that I'm building the first 2 courses here. And we're already making changes to the plans in these courses. And when the lectures drop, everyone in the guild gets them immediately, but we're making changes based on what's happening in real time. So if you want to be a part of this, come and sign up. It's a yearly subscription. That way you're going to get all the things up front, including skills for your AI, DevOps work. It's all the stuff that was listed on screen there. So go check that out. I'm super excited. This is the first. The stream is really hearing about it or seeing it, I think. Maybe I did tease once before. But I thought I would do that something special just because I have my special friend on, Michael Irwin. Woo! Tell the people who you are and what you do.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm glad to be back here. So my name is Michael Irwin. I'm a longtime friend of Bret's and actually a high fiver as well, too. So join the High Fivers Club if you're not as well, too. Hurrah! I work at Docker. But even before working at Docker, I was a captain right there with Bret, and we're both in Virginia, and we traveled the world speaking at conferences and having all kinds of fun. It's funny. We probably see each other more outside of Virginia than we do in Virginia, but
that is true. That is true. If we include DC, that's also true, because we used to have this Northern Virginia / DC Docker event years and years ago, and we would see each other there every year. But we're hours apart, and just like Nirmal and Phil and a lot of the other Docker captains and people that are all in this community physically in Virginia and the East Coast of America, we don't see each other. Like I have my podcast co-host, and I don't see him. I've seen him, I think, about as much in the real world in this area that I've seen you. And we've all known each other over a decade now. Actually, I think technically the original captain's anniversary is in June. So we are coming up on the 10-year of the captain's program, and we should do something. But we were all talking about that in chat several times over the last couple of months about what are we going to do, and like who's still left, like who of the original people are still around and still doing the same thing. I mean, it's amazing now. Like we've all grown up, and people have gotten career boosts, and they're in executive level, and they're not touching containers because they're not hands-on, and then there's those of us still left in the trenches that are still doing
the work,
doing the work of getting this stuff to just behave like we wanted it to behave. But I'm excited to get in. We're going to have to jump in quickly because I feel like this is actually like 3 hours of content that we're going to try to cram into an hour. So for those of you in chat, just so you know, the reason we do this live, this is a podcast recording, but the reason we do it live is for you to ask questions, for us to get your questions answered, and hopefully you got some good questions that'll make the podcast more interesting to listen to. So you all are smart people. Like think up some good stuff to ask, because I don't always have all the best questions. So thank you for those of you in chat, by the way. We've got Kavaltov. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but I'm going to try. We got Conrad. What's up, Conrad? We've got DevOps 12, I3Y. We've got Cliff Dive 9 in here. Don't forget to like the stream. And then it's Mike and me. So first up on our list, I'm basically, Michael's going to do all the work here. So first on this list since we've really had, like, if you didn't know the history, by the way, Michael and I, like, we've started to do this yearly everything in Docker because this could be like a dedicated Docker podcast with as much stuff as you guys have produced in the last year. Like we could just do nothing but Docker. And obviously that we do more than that on my channel. So the challenge is, how do we catch up? How do we get people to realize all the releases, all the updates, all the features? And we're only going to cover the major bits, I feel like. So kind of like that old commercial, if you're old enough, in the 90s, there was this guy that would talk really fast on TV commercials about like, I think he was like a car. He sounded like a car salesman, and he was selling little toys, and he was micro machines. That's what they were called, micro machines. It's amazing how my old brain remembers those things. And I feel like we're going to have to talk that fast, but people can always slow it down in their podcast player.
That's right. Yep.
But the first thing up that you gave me on your list was talking about hardened images. So can you give me, like, assuming someone hasn't tried hard images yet, what is the difference between like all the Docker images we know about and then the hardened images that we now the industry has sort of established what this is as an industry thing, and Docker is one of the leaders?
Yeah, so hardened images is I would say a collection. It's a category of container images that are really designed for folks that are interested in making sure that their supply chain is tight and is secure. Even in the blog post here, the second paragraph there, why supply chain attacks are exploding. And we see, $60 billion in damage, tripling from 2021. No one is safe. Like, obviously, that's a little bit of hype around that as well, too. But the idea around a hardened image is that when you use this hardened image, it's going to have much less in it to start with. Only the things that are needed to run your application. So, for example, if I'm running a node-based application, I can use a hardened image that doesn't even have an npm and yarn and the package managers installed. It just has the node runtime, which does change a little bit of how I build the image. I have to actually install those dependencies maybe in another stage in my Docker file, but then my final image is much more locked down and secure. In fact, it may not even have a shell in it. And so if that container were to be compromised, the blast radius, the number of things that can be done with that container are quite limited because it doesn't have any ability to install new stuff there. So again, it's this idea of trading off a little bit of flexibility and ease of use, but to make it more hardened and more secure, ready for production workloads.
Right. Now, these images can still be used locally, but there is a little bit of like onboarding and understanding around like what you can do in them and what you can't, especially for development. Is this of the kind where there's like a dev image or an alternative option that has a little bit more in it, like maybe a shell in it that I can use locally?
Yeah, so going back to that node example, I could use a dev variant that then has a shell, it has the npm package manager, et cetera. So many of our images have a dev variant that have these additional things baked into it. And then I can either use that in development or I can use that to help install the things that would eventually need to be available in my final production image as well. So not every image has a dev variant, but especially those that I'm going to be building, the node, the Pythons, et cetera, are going to have these dev variants.
Yeah. I just want to call out Gabriel in chat, by the way. He said, many thanks, Bret. One of the best things I've done in my life was purchase your OG Docker Mastery course back in 2017. Which is still around, by the way. People still take that course. We just had people in the Discord chat showing up. If you're not in our Discord chat, by the way, down in the description, we own the DevOps channel in Discord, discord.gg/DevOps. Gabriel, that's great to hear. It changed your whole life and career forever. Very grateful. You know what's amazing? I'm going to just like sideline this a little bit, and Christy, you don't have to put this in if you don't want to, but it is a fun story. What I'm so grateful for as an educator is, a lot of like when you're a teacher in school, you don't always get to meet your kids when they grow up and see how you affected them. But because I still go to KubeCon and other conferences, I'm actually going to be at GoTo Chicago, which I haven't been to since I think 2018. So we realized, were you there? I think you were there.
I think I spoke at that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Nirmal was there, Laura was there, I was there. We had it was a great group of people. It was, of course, we were talking all about containers. I was there talking about probably Swarm. We did a workshop. So now this time I'm going back, and they have me speaking on AI for GitHub Actions, and then I'm doing an all-day workshop on GitHub Actions. Cool. And so and there will be containers and Docker stuff throughout that whole day. So it's not far from the 8 years ago that we were all there. And we were all commenting. We actually were talking with Betty in chat, who's used to be the chief marketing officer at Docker, and we were all like, "Wow, was that really 8 years ago? Where has the time gone? That just feels like a couple of years ago." But what the whole point of me saying that, Gabriel, is that I now get to meet the students from 2017 who, if they were already an engineer at the time, they're now like the engineering lead, or they've now gotten a job at Apple or at Google, and or the people that in 2017 were maybe still in university, and now they're in the middle of their career, and I get those people come up to me at the conferences, and I'm so grateful because I get to take selfies and we get to talk about their job, and they have a cooler job than I do, and they get to do all this amazing stuff with these big tech companies, and they talk about how like Docker was such an influential technology in the early days, and they were very excited about learning DevOps and learning engineering. And the stories are just the best. And so anytime I can get a chance to meet one of the students or hear from any of them nowadays, and hopefully maybe you take my next course, because hopefully I'm still relevant and I still know what I'm talking about. But anyway, sidebar on that. That was fantastic. I'm so glad you jumped in the channel. It's been almost a decade since all of this started. So back to Hardened images. Sorry for the sideline on that. All right. So you announced after that, that they were going free. The headline was free hardened images, which up until then, in my experience, the challenge with other free hardened images was either they weren't really that usable in production unless I paid for them, or like Google had this distroless thing, which they were really early on. That was an early concept. We were at the time we were calling it distro. I think now we have the definition of difference between distroless and hardened. Hardened to me is like an improvement on distroless. Distroless was a smaller image, but also harder to use. And one of the challenges with distroless was it was harder to get to use them, and they were only so many of them that were provided. It wasn't like it was the entire catalog. So can you talk to me a little bit about like what's actually free for those engineers that are wanting to adopt it, and then what's the paid tier, and where does that line get drawn?
Yeah. So great question. So our free tier is available. Anybody can just go to it, dhi.io, and then that'll redirect to the catalog. And there's several hundred images that are available there on the free tier. Now the free tier images are still going to give you. And I see Bret pulling it up here. You're gonna get all these images, and anybody can use them. Now the difference between this and the free tier is the paid for tier, the enterprise tier, is that the enterprise tier is going to give you SLAs around those images. So when new vulnerabilities come out, they'll get patched, they'll get released, et cetera. But then there's also guarantees, which a lot of organizations need for audit compliance, et cetera, that there's SLAs around that. Additionally, the paid for tier has this really cool customization pipeline. So for example, a lot of organizations may use HTTPS proxy certs at their network boundary, and they want to see everything that's going in and out of their network. With this customization pipeline, organizations can actually customize the image that they get from Docker Hardened image to bake in these proxy certs as part of the actual build pipeline. So by the time the image ends up in their organization, it's mirrored into their org. It's starting from this DHI base, and then has these other customizations applied to it. And so, and all these images are built with Salsa level 3 build pipelines and everything. You can validate attestations and how things are built and whatnot. There's a lot of really cool aspects to it. But again, at Docker, we decided access to these hardened images should be available to everybody. And it's been neat to see like the open source space really start to take up on it. N8N has adopted it for their base images, and others as well too. So again, by making these available, it's helping slowly anyways, the entire ecosystem just become a little bit more secure, and also think about supply chain a little bit more than we have in the past.
Yeah. The challenge before this was always that the difference between using, like Slim images or Alpine images from Docker Official, and then the self-created hardened image. I always felt like a huge leap, and it required. I almost felt like at times it required a 10x level of knowledge and understanding. AI has probably made that a lot easier for us, and we can understand things and troubleshoot a little bit better with AI. But the knowledge that even I had, someone who was like deeply invested in the Docker ecosystem and obsessed with Docker files and minification of things and multi-stage. I mean, I'm the guy that's writing the 200-line Docker files when you probably could get away with 80 lines of Docker file, but I would take it to the next level, and I would be the one on the team that was the only one that understood it, which is that's not a great thing because I was using every trick in my tool bag to make this thing slim, and then the problem was always that the team would have to maintain that. And I would leave as the consultant knowing that like I've created them this really sophisticated minified image that's good or better for production, less CVEs. But if they have one stumbling block or one dependency gets, fails and they need to change a dependency lock, it might be a little tricky for them to figure out how to fix that. Or there might be a CVEs that they don't really know how to deal with because of ways that I was copying in certain packages versus installing them and like doing side loading of stuff from other images into the same image. Yeah. Like there was all these little tricks you can do if you get really deep into Docker file stuff. But I feel like these hardened images are such an easy button now that if I was to start a company or if I was to walk into a company today and they had, they pretty much all should have requirements for hardened images at this point. But if they didn't, I would absolutely be pushing for them to lean into a hardened image platform because it to me solves a major supply chain risk area with a problem that someone else has already solved, like a fix that someone else has already done for you. And it is not easy to fix yourself. I think even with AI to pre-build your own image with everything on top of like an Ubuntu or something and have everything thoroughly checked and thoroughly scanned. And I think that's still a really rough area to do because there's still a lot in the regular Ubuntu image. Like there's still a lot of stuff going on in there. So I'm a huge fan of these. In case you could notice it on the for you podcast listeners, I've been shouting from the rooftops for at least 8 years. I can actually go back to DockerCon, I think 2019, where I did a whole talk on Node.js and part of that talk was really about locking down the images, getting rid, never using the default image, always using at least Slim, the risks of Alpine and Musel are maybe a little, not so much as a risk anymore, but they were back in 2019, they were a little dicey at times. And so I felt like I was shouting from the rooftops, but the answer or the solution to that was to expect teams to like 3x their knowledge in just how a Docker file works so that they could even attempt this level of sophistication. So that's my long way of saying this is all good stuff. Like people should be looking at these to see if they can fit even the free ones before, even if they can't get budget, to figure out if they can use some of the free ones, even if you can't use them all, or you can just find a few of the images to migrate over. Like this is one of those things where it's probably a 6-month project. If you probably have dozens of images. Like if you're watching this show, you're probably someone who has dozens of images in production, the different types of images. And so you are going to have to go one by one. And you should probably, in my experience, probably start with like your programming images, because if you can get like a Python or a Node.js image to actually start working on hardened, and you're a Python shop or a Node shop or a Ruby shop, like if you can get that one image that you use for your programming, then you've probably won a lot because you've probably got a bunch of apps in production that will suddenly drop from possibly hundreds or thousands of CVEs down to very few, like maybe even if you're lucky, maybe on a couple of hands between all your dependencies. If you're super lucky, maybe you can get close to zero. But just because the base image is close to zero or at zero doesn't mean that your app will be. But so it's like once you install your dependencies, So we can all hope and dream that someday we will all be zero everywhere. But I feel like that's the strategy. If I was to step into a shop today, it's like, okay, let's go see what we can do with what's your most popular image? Like what's the one you're using everywhere? Let's go see if we can attempt that. And then you got to get the developers on board. And then you're going to have this whole process where the developers are going to, like, it's not going to work locally. So you're going to have to swap out for the dev images. And you're going to have to train people and educate people on how these images work a little differently. And then maybe you can get management buy-in when you finally get it to work. And they're like, I see the benefits. Our security team loves it. Let's go for paid, and let's get a purchase order together. And then finally you can start rolling out some more of these customized images. I love that you can build them customize on the platform. That's a pretty
Yeah.
cool feature because like we're all like, this is all 101 stuff that we're talking about, but the day you hit the ground running with a new image and you realize that the customization you have to apply to an image is usually significant.
Yeah. Well, and also like, well, the nice thing about the customization pipeline then is that every time the base image, okay, if we have a new version of, we'll just use Node again, the next version of Node gets pushed out, that customization is automatically going to be applied. You don't have to figure out, wait, how are we going to respond to updated base images? Now we need to build our own images and now roll it out and all that kind of stuff. Like it's just part of the service. So, and I was actually, yeah, I'm glad you pulled it up on screen. I was going to give Jesse.id a shout out here as well too. Thanks for dropping your success stories in chat. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to hear from people out there in the wild actually using it, because I kind of fired all my consulting clients a couple years ago. I'm now back in looking for some new ones that want to do some AI stuff in DevOps. But I had kind of took a break from consulting to just do content and make courses. And what I noticed was that was around the time that Chain got really big, and then eventually Docker came out with hardened images, and I don't yet have production experience with a lot of these hardened images, and I am very curious about like the challenges to adoption, the edge cases that maybe they don't cover yet. Like, are there situations where like you can't use hardened images? Like, is that a thing, or are there scenarios where like hardened images are a utopia and like every single thing you use in your company is hardened, and maybe you make a unilateral decision that only hardened images will ever be used? Like I haven't heard a lot of the stories. I hear there's a ton of stuff on the internet about people like day one with hardened images, but I'd love to hear some of the battles from the trenches. So anyway, anything else on hardened images? We could talk about this all. We could make this a hardened image episode, but we have so much more to talk about.
Yeah, I think that's good, and actually kind of serves as a good segue into what we get next too. So,
yeah. All right. What's next? Let's see. Gordon AI agents just got an update. Okay, so I can speak to a little bit. Gordon AI is uniquely in Docker Desktop, right?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, this is not a web service. This isn't a website. This is a feature in Docker Desktop. It is a free feature, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And when it first came out, it was when I remember it, it was actually pretty early. Like this was at least a couple of years ago, I feel like. And it was originally designed around helping answer my Docker specific questions in case I didn't have like some other ChatGPT subscription at the time or whatever. And so we were using it to understand maybe what was going on in a Docker file. Like you could give it a compose file and ask it to describe what's in that compose file. And I remember very specifically, one of the early things that we were focused on with the Docker team as captains was improving that AI so that it was actually smarter about Docker specific stuff than the general ChatGPTs of the world, right? Because they just go on world knowledge, and there's obviously a lot that's happened in Docker, and there's a lot of updated documentation, and things change constantly. So it always felt to me like it was becoming the Docker. I didn't have to tell it, hey, please go read the documentation because it's changed, or hey, don't use the version statement in compose anymore because that's 6 years old. We don't do that anymore. Like it started to understand the latest habits. So that was then, but I haven't tried it lately. So what's going on with the Gordon beta? Is Gordon back in beta, or has Gordon always been in beta?
Yeah, it's always been in beta.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't know when it's going to.
I mean, AIs in general are always beta.
Gmail. Yeah.
Right. Like beta, AIs all should be labeled beta at this point. Like they're all beta.
It's always changing. Yeah. Yeah. So what we've done with Gordon is we've actually completely re-architected it. And we'll talk about C agent / Docker agent a little bit more in a little bit. But actually, Gordon is backed by Docker agent now. And so it provides opportunities to do multi-agent kind of stuff. And so it's much smarter about how it does things. So the screenshot we're pulling up here, this is through the CLI interface. Thank you, Navbar.
Oh, I zoomed out too much. Okay.
All good.
Zoomed out too much.
And so you can see here, okay, this is just a the prompt was give me a summary of my running containers, and it's pulling up a coding agent and that kind of stuff. But off on the right side, you'll see a little bit of that right sidebar where it lists out agents, and you'll see like coding agent and DHI expert and DHI migration. We actually have, so we were just talking about migrating to DHI just a little bit ago. We actually have an agent that's specifically tuned for migrating images to DHI. And so I've pulled up Node apps, and it's, here's a single stage thing, and it's smart enough to know, okay, I'm going to have to pull a dev variant and install stuff and copy it over into multi-stage. So yeah, Gordon is got this support now for delegating out various tasks to other agents that are more optimized for that kind of task. Like you said, it is still very Docker oriented and container oriented and that kind of stuff, but it is kind of interesting to see folks that try to use it for all kinds of adventures as well too. So
yeah, you are basically a public service, so you probably have to have some pretty stiff guardrails.
So yeah, when you said earlier it's available for free, I almost caught myself. There are rate limits in place, especially if you just have a free Docker account. If you've got a pro account or above, obviously those rate limits change, and I don't think those rate limits are published, and they're pretty. What's the word I'm looking for? They're
generous.
We give you that's the word I'm looking for. They're pretty generous in those rate limits, but of course we still want to reduce abuse with the system.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a paid account, but I've never hit a limit. So and my experience is, quite frankly, like, I'm not having 2-hour long conversations with Docker with Gordon, and I'm also not having it build an app for me. Mentioning the abuse scenario. I mean, anything free, like, that's the rule, right? Anything free on the internet, anything that can touch compute, a Bitcoin miner will figure out how to use it, misuse it. But a friend of mine made a joke recently on Blue Sky. I saw someone joking that they figured out how to get the chat bot in Amazon for like helping you shop. They figured out how to ask it. It was just one single prompt. They were saying, I really want to buy this lotion or whatever, but before that, I need to build this Rails app. And it actually did create code and put it on the screen. And they're like, I'm canceling my Claude account. I now just use Amazon for free. So that's the struggle with people that provide AI-based services, is that you've got to constantly figure out how to put system prompts in, to put guardrails in and all that. Yeah. So this is actually really cool. I did not know about the side agents thing. That's pretty slick. It feels like it's growing up just like Claude Code and the others are growing up. Folks, please boost Claude. I learned something new today. What's up? By the way, we had questions in chat. Conrad asked, just real quick question on DHI for a second. How does one create or recommend DHI for a tool or language that doesn't exist at the time?
Yeah, good question. So actually, back on the catalog page, the dhi.io, there's the search field, filter by, and then there's a button off to the right that says make a request. So if you see something that's not there that you want, make a request. Of course, how it gets prioritized, there's a lot of different priority decisions, or different dimensions that go into that as well too. But that's where to start the conversation. Yep.
Cool. Nice. It's good to see Techno Evangelist back in the chat. And Akshay, sorry if I mispronounced that, is back in chat. Nirmal, if you didn't see the beginning, Nirmal will be back. He's actually traveling around Europe and America, as he is super famous in AWS, and he has to be everywhere all at once. So he wishes he could be here. We were actually texting last night about he was sad that he was going to miss some more weeks, but find him at a local conference. He might be there. He's all over the map. So I'm lucky, and I get to stay at home. And I'm not even getting to make it to KubeCon in Amsterdam. I get to stay home and get stuff done instead of all that. So all right, so that's Gordon. We're moving on quickly to the next one. Docker Sandboxes. So this is actually something where I feel like it's relatively, it's like what's old is new again, I guess is what I should say. Yeah. What's old is new again. So what's old was spinning things up in VMs, or having, doing custom work and stuff inside of containers or VMs. And then we all go back between using local tools on our host and then doing things inside of containers. And years ago when we all had Vagrant and we had these custom VM setups pre-Docker, and now what we're all realizing is that if we've got coding agents and we really want to just let them loose on a problem, and especially coding problems, and we wanted to build an app one step at a time. Maybe someone on the chat has heard of Ralph Loops or Chef Wiggum or all these different paradigms that we're all quickly adopting that didn't even exist 6 months ago, maybe even not even 3 months ago. And we're realizing that we would much rather just let the AI cook without prompting us for every single command, and that it's really good at the command line and we just need to give it a shell with some tooling. But also, wouldn't it be nice if it didn't have complete control over my computer? And more importantly, for us DevOps people, this is something that's been happening in the guild lately, is discussing around, I also might have a bunch of credentials logged in on my system that I don't necessarily want my AI to have those credentials. Like, I'm logging into GitHub. My GitHub command line tool has all my permissions. I don't even know how to scope my GitHub tool to a limited set of permissions unless I create a new user, log out, and log back in. We've got challenges in the industry we're going to have to keep solving around taking our agent and giving it some permissions, but not all permissions. And how do I do that without ruining my environment? And it's almost like at the end of the day, do I just create all these accounts for my AI to give it access? But now I've got to literally double the amount of account managements and licensing fees.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of problems that the industry has to work through that we haven't solved yet. So that's my setup for the problem set of, if you look around at all these toolings, Claude Code, I'm a big open code fan. I'm actually building some videos this week, hopefully, on open code, because I want to get the word out about how great and how awesome open code is. But these tools, especially ones like open code, they default to not prompting for every single command, and they run with my privileges on my machine locally. So especially being a security-minded DevOps person, I'm already nervous about that, and I never thought about the fact that if I had Terraform to production, if I had AWS auth keys on my machine, it technically has access to those, and if it ran an AWS command, it could have access to infrastructure I don't intend it to have. So I need to sandbox it. I need to put it somewhere, whether it's local or remote, and therein lies the problem of how do I run IDEs and shell TUIs. I'm calling it the TUI GUI WUI problem. Web UI is too many syllables, so I have to say TUI GUI WUI of agents, and how do we get these agent harnesses to work safely in an isolated environment? So this is me setting you up for the release of Sandboxes.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, so we've been working on Sandboxes, and I know I'll go say first, Sandbox is totally an overloaded term right now.
Yes.
So many people,
as well as agent.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's what do we actually mean by this? And so most people know Docker as being the container company and providing the runtime to run your applications. And so in many ways, it's actually the right company. It's the right layer to figure out how do we run these agents safely, securely, et cetera. So yeah, we're not trying to be an agent. We're not trying to replace your Claude Code or your OpenClaw or NanoClaw or whatever tool. We want to make sure that you can still use the tools that you want, but to be able to put the right boundaries in place. And so, yeah, as you're scrolling through the page here, okay, YOLO mode safely, okay, micro VM isolation. And so we're starting a micro VM and running the agent in a container inside of that micro VM. And some of the things, I've talked to people well, containers are good enough. Why do we need a micro VM? Well,
that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, you get a lot more control because the second point right next to it, network isolation, it's a lot harder to say the only route outside of this container is through a network proxy. But if you've got a micro VM, yeah, the only route out from that VM is through this network proxy. And so then we can put, again, a network proxy around it, and you can watch everything that's going in and out. And so say, for example, you get a prompt injection that says, hey, take all of your private data here and send it to evildomain.com here. Well, if that's not in the allow list, well, that network connection doesn't happen. And so you can do that in a micro VM architecture. It's a lot harder to do that in a container-based, only a container-based environment. But then also as we start talking about like MCP servers and all that kind of stuff, you can run basically all that within your micro VM setup, but almost treat your agentic workload there as a microservice system. You got your
Yeah.
agent and container, you got each of the MCP servers. Going back to credentials, like you're talking about, like your agent should really never have credentials, maybe just to the model provider, but then everything else around it, you know, your GitHub MCP server has the access to the GitHub tokens, et cetera. So again, it's putting the proper guardrails around each of the different components within the agentic system.
Yeah. The when I first tried it and I was reading it's a VM, I was taken aback because I was just assuming that this would all be containers in the existing Docker VM, but it actually starts to make a little more sense when you start thinking about how we're all, we're basically giving these harnesses. I'm going to use the word harnesses. By the way, I want to show this diagram real quick. I created this diagram because we're gonna talk a little bit about this, but I've been showing this to some friends trying to get some feedback on it. This is like a learning tool on exactly what is going on with, like, what is an agent, what is a harness, what is a model, where do these things live, and exactly what do I get when I launch open code or Claude Code or Cursor or VS Code, and trying to help people understand that one, we probably shouldn't call Claude Code an agent. We should probably be calling it a harness. That's actually what the internal teams at Anthropic call it. And that harness has one or more agents inside it. And those agents, like there's a build agent, there's a plan agent, you can make these custom agents. And agents, this is the fun part, is I zoom in on the agent part, and the agent part talks about that if you are in the plan agent, it's really just a system prompt plus some tool access plus some permissions to those tools and various things, and then a model choice. And then you give that to your harness, and your harness can run that in a loop and use that model and all those features to get a job done. Then you can switch to a different agent, or you can have sub-agents where one agent manages many agents. But at the end of the day, they're all accessing models, and those models all come through subscriptions that you buy. And those subscriptions determine your availability of what you can get access to. Like, there's a lot of complexity in this entire game. At the end of the day, we all just start up VS Code or Claude Code or something, and we don't really think about all that mess. But when we run it, and we're running it in a directory, usually on a project, not always, but usually in a project directory, and we typically want it scoped to that directory, unless we're maybe working on something larger. So then we scope it to maybe 3 different directories, or we have a directory of directories of the project because we're microservice. But the point is there that you usually don't need it to have access to /bin on your system or a /user. Like, you need it to just be there. And then while you're still running that, you need to run another one in a different directory, because that thing's going to go cook for 20 minutes and you need to work on something else in the meantime. So you actually need multiple sandboxes that these agents don't have necessarily access to each other's stuff. And one of them might, especially in the DevOps world where you deal with certain things of privilege and certain things of not, you might have one agent that actually has like a Terraform production key in it, or a staging key, and another one that you want very isolated that is going wild on a code base that you're just making a crazy PR that you've just let it loose, right? And that one you're going YOLO mode, but on this one you're you've given a lot of rules, and you really don't want these things to meet, which means at the end of the day, you actually need separate sandboxes simultaneously, which historically the Docker desktop VM doesn't do, right? Like, it's a single VM with a bunch of your containers running in it. And so when I first started using it, I started to realize, oh, this thing is actually scoping my agent setup per directory. And I can have one or many of these all running simultaneously in different directories, and I start them up and down like I do containers, but they're really, like, it almost to me is like it's my new command to run open code. So instead of me just running open code directly, I do this Docker, sandbox run open code in a certain directory, and I can give it all these fancy options to bind mount things and do all that stuff. And I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to what comes next with it, because I got a feeling you all have a giant list of features that you want to add to this thing to make it sweet. But I can see where eventually this will be the only way I probably run agents.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of customers that are interested in this as well too, because once you've got this proper sandboxing, well, then an organization can also say, hey, here's our organizational policy. You can only use these model providers, or you can only use these MCP servers, or these are the mount points or network. I mean, again, you can start putting governance and control over this. Because yeah, the biggest companies in the world want to use agents. They want to get the productivity gains, but it's scary to just say, hey, YOLO, when we are a huge corporate environment and you
Yeah.
don't know what can go wrong. And so it's pretty awesome. Yeah, we're building the tooling so literally every developer can benefit from it, but especially in the organization space can have the governance and audit and
Right.
visibility and whatnot. So it's a pretty fun space to be in right now, actually.
Right, because this isn't like even though this is like a standalone binary, because like to me, I realized that I could actually, I can't run it without Docker Desktop running, but it's not listing like containers in my Docker Desktop GUI. I'm guessing that at some point you'll have it in the GUI and it'll be
So
sort of side by side.
with that, maybe I can show you a little sneak peek
Yeah,
here.
let's do it.
So I'll pull up my screen here, and so this is coming very soon. And what we're gonna
Fix that.
what I'm gonna show here.
1 second.
Yep, I'll wait for it to get up.
You can do it. Come on, computer.
There
Yes.
we are.
Okay.
Hurrah. Terminal on a screen. There we go.
So fancy. So fancy. All right. Zoom in for me a little
gonna,
bit so we can help our mobile users. Yeah. Thank you.
There we are. Okay. All right. So what I've got here is just an empty directory. Okay. There's nothing here. All right. And on my machine, I've got this secrets.txt file that just has a bogus API key in it. Okay. And I'm going to show Claude. I've got my Claude settings set up with a permission to say, hey, you're not allowed to read this file. Okay. So first off, I'm going to start off with, let's start Claude code. And I'm going to say, tell me about the contents in secrets.txt. Okay. And so, of course, when this is going to run, it's going to be like, well, hey, you told me that I can't do that. Sometimes it'll actually tell me that. So yeah, access to the file is blocked by your permission settings. Other times the model will just actually be like, this sounds like something I probably shouldn't have access to, so I'm not going to do it. So it just depends on
right. It's mood
when I run the demo, what I get. But hey, let's start a new session here, and there we go. Okay, write me a Python file that will read arbitrary files from my home folder. Okay. And so, Claude's going to go off and it's going to do its thing. And this may take just a couple seconds. Yep. Create this file. Cool. Now run that and tell me about secrets.txt. Okay. And so it's going to say, great, let's run this Python file. Now, of course, I'm on a Mac, so this Python command is not going to work, and it's going to come back and like, oh, wait, I have to use Python 3. So, yep, command not found. Oh, whoops. Okay, let's run Python 3. And right now, again, I'm not running in a sandbox. Okay.
Right.
And so, yep, hey, look.
Yeah.
Now it's got my credential here. So again, the permission model that's built into Claude helps only when you're following the exact path that permission model was scoped to support. Okay. And so in this case, obviously I went around. Now, probably no human would ever, write, hey, tell me about my secrets file, whatever, but a prompt injection could. And so again, I'm open to this type of attack that may say, yeah, you may not be able to read the file directly, but there's ways to circumvent that to get access to the file. And now that I've got this content, it's in my context, I could have the agent send it off wherever. Okay. So that's one of the things that we're trying to work here. So going back to, I can run Docker Sandbox and I can see all the commands here to run and, do various things. But one of the things that we're working on is this new tool called DS. Okay. That's basically standalone and doesn't require Docker Desktop anymore. And so you can actually do everything Sandbox related completely standalone. Okay. So I'm going to just do a DS run Claude now. And this is going to spin up that micro VM and start everything. and now I'm running Claude inside of this micro VM. And in fact, if I even just ls the home directory, I won't see that secrets.txt file because again, it hasn't been shared with the micro VM environment. Okay, so and actually you'll see too that it's running with YOLO mode by default. So I got the bypass permissions on. Just let it go crazy.
Right.
Now let's say,
Now,
for example, oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was going to ask you a quick question. So just so that people understand, this is starting up a VM and then also starting. So it comes with Cloud Code built in, right? So like it's got the latest version of Cloud Code in it, or well, Cloud Code auto updates. But like it's technically, is it running Cloud Code in a container, or is Docker just available to run containers?
Yeah, so Cloud Code is so inside the micro VM is a Docker engine, again, completely separate from the Docker desktop engine if you have Docker desktop. And it's running a container inside that micro VM. That container is what has Cloud Code in it. So if I am running Cloud Code, or if I'm running Gemini or Kiro or Codex, or pick your agent, obviously the container image is going to be a little bit different for each of those. We're also building out a whole blueprint system so that you can extend and customize that the container workload that's running there and modify.
So you can have your all your preferred tooling that you might ask Claude to use.
Exactly.
You can have that all built in, because that's one of the questions I was going to ask was like, how do I customize this? Because if I like certain tooling, or if I want, I'm assuming this doesn't have every programming language in existence auto pre-installed, right? Yeah. So,
Yeah, when we first, because actually the first iteration of Docker Sandbox was kind of that route. It was just the kitchen sink of here's all the programming languages, and it's like, it's a ginormous image at that point.
Right.
It's like let's pull that back a little bit here, guys. So in this case, I don't have my secrets.txt file, which means like it can't get leaked because it's not even shared with the micro VM here. Now, of course, if I wanted to, I could, when I start the VM, mount that, I could share that. But again, I'm giving the agent then explicit access to it because I've now shared it with the VM there. All right, so some other things. I've got Anthropic. Obviously, this is running Claude Code. If I just do a grep for like my Anthropic API key, you'll see that, well, there's no output here. I've got no Anthropic API key defined here. That network proxy that we talked about earlier is actually injecting my API key when it's sending requests off to Anthropic. So the agent itself, in fact, even if I look at can't remember if we've got it. Oops. If I look at the Claude settings, we'll see. Oh, I'm in the wrong file. There's too many settings files. Okay. The API key helper here is just echo proxy manage. Like the API key that the agent thinks is using a key proxy managed. But again, the proxy around it is then swapping it out with the credential that I've already pre-configured it with. So
I didn't, by the way, when I was running it, I wasn't configuring it ahead of time. I was just getting the prompt, and then I would auth in with OAuth on it, and then it's saved. So it appears to me that what these sandboxes are saved on disk after I spin them up, and they're there for me to restart them. And so whatever settings, if I customize them individually, those settings are in that sandbox, and I can imagine myself creating an eventual workflow where I'm somehow mounting all of my favorite settings for things, so that I don't have to do this over and over again. But the key problem is a tricky scenario of like, how do I auth in, and where does it save those, and how do I get those in there safely? We're gonna have to solve that problem for like every CLI tool. Like I've got 1Password that's auth on my, like if I think about the number of CLI tools that I have on my host that are already authed as me, that I may or may not want my agent to have access to, it's more than I can think of. It's more than I even realize. And it's not just agents, it's GitHub, it's 1Password, it's AWS, it's DigitalOcean, it's Vercel, it's you name it, go down the list. And I'm gonna have to figure out a method for how do I plug in those tools when I need them. Like how do I, and this is really just bind mounting files, right? Like I feel like these concepts for the sandbox are translatable between how we run containers with bind mounting and then how we run these sandboxes. Is that a true statement?
With some of this, yes. So for example, again, when Claude Code is sending API calls to Anthropic, the network proxy around it is injecting the credential on the way out. And we've got hooks in place so that, okay, when you send requests to GitHub, here's how you can also inject your credential into those calls as well too. And then the secrets engine can be fed by eventually by 1Password or other password vaults as well too, so that there's ways to kind of hook in your credentials without the agent ever, and the agent will never actually have access directly to those credentials. They're all being injected by the security boundaries around it.
Can I start these with Compose?
Not right now, no.
Okay. Because that sounds like when I think about all the things I might want to inject in there, or like I want to spin up 3 different agents at the same time. Really, I get to my desk and I'm like, okay, I got my 5 projects I'm working on simultaneously. I can imagine myself wishing that I could just manage all this with a Compose file, but it's just not launching a container in the default Docker system. It's launching a bunch of VMs with their own containers. Anyway, this whole show is gonna be really about me just throwing you a bunch of requests that I have for the Docker team to build. Okay.
So just one other quick little demo here. So if I were to curl example.com, and I'll just put the verbose flag on it, what I'm going to see is that it's blocked by the network policy. Okay, so that there's basically, hey, that's a domain name that's not authorized by the sandbox. Now I can, when I start also DS without giving an argument, I get this cool TUI here. So I can see my sandbox running up here on the left-hand side, and I can start a new sandbox, but I can see all the network requests that are going in and out of the sandbox, all the different domain names that are being used here. And I can see that example.com. And I can actually, it's pretty cool. This is the first time I've seen a TUI that's like, I can actually like double click on it and open up the entry here. And yeah, let's hit A to allow this host. And sure, let's allow it. I see that it's been allowed now. And now let's just go back to the sandbox and say, hey, go ahead and curl it. And now it works. And so like I've been playing with scenarios where I tell the agent beforehand, hey, if you run a network blocked issues, let me know and I'll go and adjust the settings if appropriate. And there was one time where I was trying to do a Go build, and the version of Go that it needed wasn't what was installed in the sandbox. And it tried to download and install Go, and it's like, hey, I can't do this. And then I just go over here and say, yeah, go ahead and allow Go, and okay, continue agent, and it was able to download and just go. So it worked pretty well, even kind of when I told it, hey, you're running in a sandbox, you're probably gonna be network isolated and bound. Let me know when you run into problems, and worked out pretty well there. But again, now if I get a prompt injection that tries to send requests off to bad places, well, I can see that, and it's going to be blocked as well too. Now, of course, this doesn't. If I give it tools that say, because we actually saw an attack once where folks were taking private data and they would use a create issues tool on GitHub and create an issue on a public repo that then the description had all the exfiltrated data. Like, of course, this isn't blocking that. If so,
yep, like a
blocking
gist,
that kind of stuff is a much harder problem.
Yeah. How does this work on Windows? Like, is it inside WSL or is it separate VMs?
Yep. But good question. We actually have micro VMs. We've made our own VMMs, our own virtual machine manager. That's actually crazy performant. And so, yep, micro VMs for each of the different sandboxes. The same experience over there. Yep.
So, okay. So does that mean you're not using the WSL shell to do sandboxes? What does that mean?
Good question. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Did I found one that you didn't know the answer to. All right.
No, you got me.
I stumped him.
The day is complete.
I stumped the master. The man with all of the knowledge has now been.
So
that was my whole goal. That was my secret.
I don't have it's so cutting edge. I don't know all the Windows answers yet.
Right. Well, I do love that it can run without Docker Desktop, only because we're like in this weird twilight zone, or like middle Earth zone of like, we don't yet have, like, we figured out what agents are going to look like inside of harnesses and where we can spin up multiple agents, but we don't yet have the rigor. Like we're going too fast for security is essentially what I feel like the industry's attitude is right now. Who cares about security? We're going too fast. And so all of this security and locking down and appropriate things that we all really need at the end of the day is sort of lagging behind a little bit by months, which in this speed of a world, that is like almost feels like years. And so what I'm noticing is I'm actually using Docker less right now because these agents aren't necessarily built for containers yet. Although you can start to see, I was actually working with Claude last night to help me understand, we want to maybe have time for this, but figuring out how I can run open code server in these sandboxes and then run the open code client, because unlike Claude, open code has a client server model, which I absolutely love. It allows me to like run the server on my local machine, and then I can be remote on my phone and a browser, just talking to it remotely through a client server model. And I can do the same thing with their GUI and their TUI. And I was like, oh, maybe I can run the open code server inside of the Docker sandbox 24/7, like just have that thing constantly running. And then when I'm at my shell, I can just jump in and out using the open code client. And then I can also connect remotely from the open code GUI to that Docker server through Tailscale. And so I've kind of, in my head, I have this vision for what I want to make work. I just don't know whether it's all going to actually work yet. I actually haven't tested it all, but I was theorizing on a plan for how I can have this always on local, essentially harness that's always available for me.
Yeah, and it's exactly what we want to be able to support as well too. And so the version of Docker Sandbox that's out right now doesn't really have an easy mechanism to publish ports or yet to access what's running inside the sandbox. This version of DS of Docker Sandbox here does provide that support, and so you'll be able to publish ports. And actually, one of the cool things here, without leaking too much, has a completely new Docker engine under the hood as well too, and has the ability to actually publish ports even after things are already running, to modify port publishing and all that kind of stuff as well too. So, so yeah, you can start a sandbox and then later on be like, oh wait, actually I want to publish a port now, and you'll be able to do that, and then also unpublish it later, so you can kind of pick and choose when you want it exposed versus not as well too.
Nice. Do we have an estimated time of dropping the DS CLI, or is this just a someday maybe?
Very soon.
Very soon. Okay. Yeah, I mean, maybe by the time we get around to editing and publishing this, that will already exist, because we are. I'm not exactly fast at like the same week publishing of the podcasts.
Yeah, quite likely.
Okay, so are we at a spot where we can move on, because we do have a few other topics, or is there anything else you think is key for people to understand around sandboxes?
Yeah, I think this is. I think we're good here. I'm done with the demo anyways, and I think the only other thing I'll just mention too is so NanoClaw. We announced a partnership with NanoClaw as well too, and so you can run NanoClaw, and as it spins up various things, it's using sandboxes. Now this is the version of Sandboxes that's deployed right now. We'll move it to DS soon as well too. But again, now having your claws running these isolated environments, it opens up some really neat opportunities, but also again reduces the risk of what happens when things go wrong.
Right. So and NanoClaw, for those that don't know, it's a like written from the ground up, more secure and stable version of OpenClaw. Is that an accurate statement?
I would say that, and yeah, it was definitely built with the kind of sandboxing model in mind, rather than just the kind of open aspect that all the other claws have right now.
Yeah,
but it's amazing too. Like most of these are like, yeah, this didn't exist a couple weeks ago, and now it's a full blown project. And even at NVIDIA GTC, and it's being announced on the keynote stage, and like every company needs a claw strategy. It's like, this didn't exist just a couple months ago. Right. Like this NanoClaw's already got 24,000 GitHub stars, and it didn't. Presumably, it didn't start until after OpenClaw came out, which OpenClaw broke the record, I believe, for the GitHub stars. Yeah. Of course, I wouldn't be surprised if it was all the agents saying that they needed to go to log into GitHub and mark the star. But real quick on the philosophy, I'm just going to read for the podcast audience. I can't see the screen. The NanoClaw philosophy is like 6 bullet points: small enough to understand, secure by isolation, built for one user,
AI native, skills over features, and the best harness, best model. Runs on Claude Agent SDK, which means you're running Claude code directly. The harness matters. Okay. So yeah, I haven't actually ran it yet. And I have been avoiding OpenClaw. Simply just, I wanted to let it settle, and I wanted to get the insanity out of the way. Sort of like I don't want to spend 3 hours setting something up to make it work. I just want something to work. So I'd rather, and well, we all know how these big these things, whenever something like OpenClaw happens, it's in the industry where it's captured the zeitgeist. I'm always like, well, I'll give it a couple of months to cook, and then the documentation will be better, and my headaches I won't be like bashing against the wall, mad about. But I'm lucky to have a couple of friends that are like neck deep in OpenClaw and make videos on it and stuff like that. So I really just watch what they're trying to do, and I'm like, I'm going to give it a few more months. I'm already so busy learning all the other AI stuff. I don't really have time anyway. So it's cool that I will probably end up starting with NanoClaw in Docker Sandbox first, more than anything else, more likely. And I did not buy the Mac Mini like everyone else did. I was going to wait on that. But yeah, this is really cool. All right, moving on from NanoClaw announcement. So it's nice that Docker's supporting that. I think some of these are probably some more rapid fire things. You want to run through them real quick?
Yeah. So I think we've talked about, I can't remember the last time I was on here, but Docker Model Runner, we've had it out for about a year now. And it's constantly still getting lots of new improvements and updates. And so this announcement was just about a month ago, bringing VLLM to macOS with Apple Silicon, which is a pretty big endeavor to be able to support VLLM Metal and have native the ability to run these VLLM models natively on Apple Silicon as well too. So really, really cool stuff that opens up a whole new world of models and model selection. So, again, if you're building applications and you want to use local models, this opens up a whole new catalog of models that are available to you. So,
yeah, to me, the important part here, if I'm getting it right, is MLX is the format that runs more, I don't know, what is it, 20 to 30% performance improvement on Macs, because it's designed for Apple Silicon. And that's one of the reasons I currently use LM Studio a lot, is because it has the MLX support. And so this VLLM essentially allows MLX to be now usable with Docker models, which means that if you're on a Mac and you're using Docker Model Runner, you will see a performance boost if you switch to Is there something I have to do, or do I have to download new models, I presume, because they have to be in the MLX format?
So the models are a little bit different. So there are VLLM models. But yeah, you just specify the model, and then if that's in your Compose stack, the next time you start up your app, it'll just download the model, and that's it. It's mostly hands off at that point.
Nice. All right, so that's cool. For those of you interested in Docker Model Runner, I have a video that's now a year old, but it's probably still very relevant when it comes to like understanding the architecture of what Docker does when it runs a model. Like why would I use this over something else, or what if I'm already using Docker? How can I inject models into my existing Docker Compose patterns and all that? And so if you're curious about that on YouTube, I still have a couple of videos on that from last year. The next one is Open Web UI plus Docker Model Runner. So Open Web UI, actually, I also had that demo last year. That's that's a ChatGPT clone. I feel like in some ways it's actually superior to ChatGPT, but you can self-host your own web UI to give you your own ChatGPT-like experience on a model of your choice running locally, or wherever you want to run your open weight models. What's improved here now that we've got a new announcement?
Yeah, so the second paragraph here is the kicker. So yeah, with this update, Open Web UI automatically detects and connects to Docker Model Runner right at localhost 12434. So if Docker Model Runner is enabled, Open Web UI uses out of the box, no additional configuration required. So it used to be quite a bit of configuration set up to be able to use models from Docker Model Runner, but now Open Web UI has official support. Zero configuration, you can just kind of spin it up and go. And it's so another way to play with your models and access them. So it's been a great collaboration with that team as well.
Yeah, and if you're someone who happens to have a half a terabyte of VRAM, you can run killer models that are near the performance of the state of the art model. So
Yep.
I have a brand new machine with only 48 gig of RAM, and I'm constantly sad at how little of the models I can run on my machine. And
Yeah.
but that is life. That is life for now.
Yep.
Custom catalogs. What's this about?
Yeah. So this is a new enhancement in our MCP catalog and toolkit area. So changing off a model runner and MCP toolkit. We've heard from folks for quite a while. Great, you've got your own catalog, and it's pretty easy to run the MCP servers from the Docker catalog. How do I provide my own catalog? How do I put my own custom servers into that? And so this is the documentation on how to do that. It's a little bit of a process to have to set up the catalog file and all the different things that are needed. But then once it's there, now you've got this custom catalog. You can distribute it with others and then use it in the MCP toolkit and all the other tooling there as well too. So yeah, now you can bring along either your own or your organization's private MCP servers. There's the first class support for it all.
Yeah, and if you haven't played with Docker MCP toolkit, there's a lot of scenarios where you basically can use Docker to augment your local harnesses, your local AI work, anything you're doing locally with custom MCPs without having to do a bunch of work on each one of your harnesses. You can actually do that in Docker if you're a Docker person, and presumably if you've been watching this far into the video, you are a Docker person. So it is, to me, it almost feels like a necessary toolkit now if you're doing any sort of adding, not only just using MCPs with your AI, but also if you're developing any sort of custom agents or any software that might have an LLM involved with that software. It also feels very easy, and I can manage it through all the Docker tooling like you would expect.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yep.
All right. Next one, dynamic MCP. I don't even know what this is. This is new to me.
Yeah. So the idea here is, so if you connect one of your harnesses to the Docker MCP, either toolkit or gateway, what will happen is that there can be tools that expose that allow the agent to go and search for MCP servers that then expose other tools. So for example, I may want to start off with a coding session that I don't have the GitHub MCP server enabled, but maybe later on the agent decides, well, hey, I need to be able to look up issue details. It can use basically a search function to say, hey, go find me a tool that can do this for me. And so what this would do is that it would search for it, find that, assuming that you've got that in your catalog and configured and ready to go, et cetera. But then it can add it to the session and then execute that tool. And then even afterwards, and the agent can say, well, hey, let's go ahead and get rid of that. So the idea there is, with this dynamic MCP, be able to manage the context window of how much of your context space is being used by tools. And so if you can dynamically add and remove and kind of adjust that, then you can have more of your context kind of focused towards your actual application, the files, et cetera, rather than just a bunch of tool descriptions. So yeah, right. Here's the list of tools that are provided through that. So you can find, you can add, configure, remove, exec, code mode, et cetera. So there's a couple.
So I'm giving the AI tool. I'm giving the AI tools to manage my tools.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Again, based on the configured catalog that you have. So the last thing you want, I did experiments a long time ago of like, can I give the AI a tool to make its own tools? And it got kind of scary there for a while, but yeah, that's kind of the idea here.
All right, man, we're gonna keep going. We've got a few more minutes. C agent GitHub action. So what is first off? What is C agent?
So C agent is actually it is an agent harness that Docker has made, and it's fairly opinionated. But the idea with C agent is that in a YAML document, I can describe the agent that I want. Okay, I want an agent that is going to go do research. And then another agent that actually then writes a technical blog post about the things that the researcher found, et cetera. And so I can kind of set up these different agents. And we've been using them internally in quite a few different ways. But Recently, we've wanted to be able to start using these in our CI pipelines, and we'll see some examples of that here in just a second. But this was a GitHub action that we made that allows you to basically plug in an agent into your CI workflow. Again, using C agent, which is open source tooling, et cetera. And so in this small snippet here, okay, it's going to point to an agent.yaml, which describes what's the prompt for the agent and what tools does it have access to, what models is it going to use, et cetera. But in this case, yeah, prompt this, or, analyze this code and take a look at it. And there's a lot of other things that the action can do. But for a couple examples, we can actually jump maybe to the next link. And this is coming from our docs team. All of our all of our Docker docs now are using this agent to review pull requests. And so you can see that there's a specific workflow that we have in that action to review a PR. And so it's going to have a base prompt. But then since this is docs, there's also an additional prompt. So starting at line 22 and beyond, here's additional prompt of things that we want to look for, and style guides and priority issues. And basically the agent's going to look at this and determine, does this pass the rules or not? And so that's dramatically reducing the time it takes for our docs team to actually review a lot of these PRs. For the most part, if the agent says, yeah, this looks good, for the most part, then it's just kind of up to the human to look at it and say, all right, just final validation, is this file in the right place, et cetera. But then let's sign off on it, let's go. So we're starting to use these agents more in our CI pipelines to review our documentation. And the final link here was actually a pretty slick thing that the docs team did, is they're using this agent and running it nightly. So there's a cron job that runs each night. And what it's doing is basically freshness checks on the documentation and just saying, hey, are things still accurate? Are they still valid? And if, for example, we update our style guide, then the next time that the agent runs through and kind of scans things, it'll pick up issues, and it'll automatically create the GitHub issues and document, here's the things that we found, et cetera. So yeah, there's some like scanner state and just some cache mechanism things. But yeah, starting line 57 there, that's where the agent's going, and you can see that it basically just goes off and does its thing. And it's so again, this is something that now runs nightly, and we have these agents running, and we wake up in the morning and say, okay, well, hey, what documentation needs to be updated? And it does like even little things of like, I saw one recently, like it flagged a page that said, hey, this feature, was just recently announced, and the agent was like, if recently announced was true maybe 6 months ago when it was actually recently announced, we should probably update this documentation. And so like it's catching little things like that, where again, as a human, I'd have to take time to go and find all those things, but that's hard to catch in a style guide. But it's something that an LLM can pick up and call out right away.
Yeah, that's the little stuff that's annoying, especially when you're trying to like understand something and you're seeing this inconsistent information. I think I even pinged in the captain's channel. Because a couple of us were trying the sandboxes, and I noticed on one page it said the open code sandbox was build in development, and on another page it said it was available. And those little things are so hard. Unless you're like the person, like unless you made a mental note, or not even a mental note, you have to physically make a Jira ticket or some ticket that you were like, okay, we're going to have to come back to this later when we launch, because this stuff shows this current status, and we're going to have to update that page. But then later you actually make it on a different page, so then you don't even think about the old page, and you certainly don't think about the old blog post that probably we all forgive old blog posts, because rarely do we go update old blog posts, especially if they got a date on them. So we all understand that. But documentation doesn't tend to have those dates, so we don't look at a documentation and go, well, this documentation page was written 6 months ago, so I expect it to be outdated. Like, we expect documentation to be current for the current version. Yeah. And this is one of those things where pretty soon we're all going to just be we're honestly going to be more critical, I think, of documentation that's outdated. Like, because we're going to be like, all you got to do is put an AI agent on this. Like, I understand that you don't have all the staff to do this stuff constantly. Like, the documentation team at Docker has always been fantastic, and it's amazing how if you remember, even just 5 years ago, much less 10 years ago, the level of upkeep and maintenance of the Docker documentation over the years, and as it's evolved and as products have become launched and fallen off of, Docker launches lots of ideas that don't always make it into production and don't always last forever, and it's just got to be a lot. And I love that this. Not all of us have public documentation, so maybe this example, but we all have got private documentation. And the idea that I can come into work and just sort of like approve 10 different things that fix one-line documentation errors, and that's like so much better than me. Like, what was the alternative, right? Was literally rereading documentation over and over again manually, just so that we can find that one little line where like, oh, we're not on V13, we're now on V20. Yeah. And we've got to update one line in a doc file. Like, these are the kind of things that just suck.
And the fatigue is so real for a human to do that. But an agent, like, great, yeah, I'm going to do it every night. Who cares, kind of thing. And so, yeah, it'll pick up on those things that we would just simply gloss over and miss.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that brings us to the end of the list, which is only a partial list. And there are a lot of other things. I'd love to spend more time on C Agent and Sandboxes. It sounds like, did you come to, other than the DS tool, which is a great little drop, is there anything else? Is there anything else where like you're working on, you're thinking about?
I mean, there's a lot more that we could hint at, but we may have to save it for another episode. So.
Okay, we have to save it for another time.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate all of this upkeep on my audience understanding how Docker is essentially trying. I look at this as like Docker is, like every software company right now, adjusting to the current climate and figuring out how. In one way, it feels like the AI world forgot that containers existed, and like they've moved. It's like they're going back to the roots of what we learned over the last decade of how really we need to be confining all this stuff to containers, and they forgot all that because containers requires a little bit of extra effort, and they don't want to slow down, and they're all competing. So why why even require people to have Docker desktop? Let's just forget about all that. So I like that. Not only is Docker trying to figure out how do we fit into this AI space, but also how can we make the AI world better. And I think you recently announced that you were a part of a new Linux Foundation. What's the new AI thing called? Do you remember?
That's a good question. I should know that off. So yeah, the AI, is it just the AI Foundation? I should know that.
Foundation... a project AI. Let me find it. We'll edit this in post.
Agentic AI Foundation.
There we go. In December, Docker announced joining the Agentic AI Foundation, which I don't actually. A lot of us are like, well, what does that even mean? To me, my take on it is there is a lot of proprietary stuff happening right now. Like Cloud Code is completely proprietary. It is definitely gathered the zeitgeist in the industry, and nothing against. We all have private code. We all have SaaSes. We all have closed source code that all of our machines, we're all running on machines usually with some sort of code like that. And so that is fine, and I do not judge that. But historically, in the world of developer tooling, things don't stay closed source in a large portion of the community very long. Like most people are on an open source IDE now. Most people are running open source. Gone are the years of closed source programming languages, which used to be a thing. Gone are the days of a lot of this base tooling we all run things on being closed source. So I am very interested in how we've got these AI companies creating a lot of closed source for competitive advantage, but also like developers will not tolerate that very long. Like they will only tolerate that as long as they have a competitive advantage over the open source. And so we have the teams like the open code team and the obviously OpenClaw and all these other offshoots of that are, I don't know. I feel like maybe heroes may be a little bit of a strong word, but they are doing the good work of making sure that open source doesn't fall behind the closed source option, because I think a lot of us don't necessarily want to replace all of our open source tooling with a bunch of closed source tooling.
Yeah.
I mean, these AIs are not as magical as we all sometimes try to put them on a pedestal. So I look at this Docker joining the Agentic AI Foundation as basically the Linux Foundation and the Kubernetes groups, which are part of the CNCF, which is a part of the Linux Foundation, basically drawing a line and saying, we are going to be leaders, not laggards, not followers. We're going to be leaders in the AI open source tooling space, and there will be plenty of opportunity for vendor solutions. But this all, not just developing in AI, not just developing with harnesses and agents, but also everything that runs AI, everything that runs our agents in the servers and production. Like, these foundational technologies should all really be open source. So let's bring all that together under one umbrella organization so that we can do things like patent protection and, guiding the working groups so that we can get all the people in the same room to make these really hard decisions. And I'm super excited about that, because for the longest time at KubeCon and these other conferences, we were really focused on the problem of, as an industry, in the ops industry, which is what KubeCon is, that we were all focused on running the AIs. And for years now at KubeCon, it's really been about the infrastructure of running AI, and then maybe eventually start to talk about running agents, which a lot of people are still not doing. A lot of people are really just using agent harnesses locally, and they're not yet actually running AI in their production with LLMs connected to it. And so I am encouraged that we're finally, I feel like in 2020, late 2025, early 2026, we're finally having these conversations around what does the local tooling ecosystem look like, and how do we engage developers to make their life better in open source for AI? And I love that C Agent exists, and that now Sandboxes is going to be a thing. Which one of those is C Agent? Which one of that is open source? Is C Agent open source?
So C Agent's open source. Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, anybody can try. Well, one thing I'll add to that as well too is there's an interesting movement happening right now, because I was kind of joking with somebody a couple of days ago. Like, to me, in many ways, this feels like early PHP days, and that may be a terrible, scary thing to say. But like, one of the things that PHP did for the space was it lowered the barrier of entry for anybody to make web applications. And so obviously that introduced a lot of security risk and vulnerabilities, and like anybody could just write a website and oops, there's a SQL injection on it, or whatever. In many ways, we're like in the same environment right now where like anybody can create an application now, because the AI has gotten that good. But at the same time, how do we do so safely? How do we do so securely? And so and in fact, I spoke at a local meetup not long ago, and there was a woman that came up to me afterwards, and this was a pretty technical meetup, and we were talking about models and the chat completions API, and it was pretty technical. And she's like, I understood maybe 10% of what you said. I'm just a small business owner. I want to learn how I can use AI to better my processes within my business, and basically have my own little secretary. And I think we may not be quite there yet, but we're getting pretty close to it, where now she could go and say, great, I need I'm just going to make up something. She didn't actually say this, but like, I need an inventory management system that works for me. And wouldn't it be great if I could somehow run this, one of the many claws out there, and now I can just open up WhatsApp and I can text my agent and just say, hey, how many shoes do we still have in stock yet? And then the agent can go and figure it out and give me my report back. Like, how do we enable that kind of workflow for the everyday person? And I think we're not far from it, but it's still very technically oriented. So I think we as a technical audience need to be thinking about how do we, because the technology definitely has the capability of going out to the masses, to the everyday person. How do we enable those folks, but also at the same time too, how do we ensure that the proper guardrails are in place? And so again, that's why I'm excited that Sandboxes and all these different things that we're doing, and the foundations in place, et cetera. So there's the right people thinking about these problems. So once we hit those levels of scale, the right eyeballs are on it. So it's an exciting time.
Yep. What a time to be alive. And I'm not getting much sleep. What a time to not sleep. Well, it's great to have you on, and we waited too long, and now that we have so much stuff that we can't fit all into a podcast. So for those of you still listening on the audio podcast version of this edited episode later, thank you so much for sticking through it. Hopefully there's something in here for everyone, and if you're a Docker container person, which would be the reason you're listening to DevOps and Docker Talk podcast, that you take a second look at some of these for how they might augment your changing workflow as you evolve into the AI harness and agents locally space. I too am also playing catch up on this. That's why one of the reasons I had Michael on was I feel like I am not able to keep up with everything the AI companies are releasing, much less adding Docker and GitHub releasing a constant slew of things as well. Like there's just, we're all overwhelmed. It's very normal. You're fine. Nobody is the expert right now. Nobody knows everything. And this is the common theme I have with whenever I talk to the smartest people in the world. I was just having a conversation with our friend Victor Farsick yesterday of DevOps Toolkit channel. He kept saying, Bret, not everybody knows everything right now, and we are at the tip of the spear in this, and we still can't figure all this out. Like there is just a lot to get through, but it does give me the pause to go, okay, maybe there is a safer, better way that today I could start experimenting with Claude Code if I was maybe on the fence about YOLO mode, which to me YOLO mode is the next unlock, really. Like, because if I have to sit here and wait for every question and answer every question, that really hampers my AI's ability. And a year ago that I think was necessary, but I think we're now at a point where even if I don't sandbox it, like I'll be honest, I've not had these sandboxes running for 3 or 4 months, but when I'm using Opus 4.5 and 4.6, it's not a single time tried to delete my entire hard drive, not once. A year ago, that was not true. It was actually trying to do wild and crazy things. I think I remember in the spring of this year, right around the time Claude Code was released, I was trying to get it to build me without having Xcode installed, just the CLI tools. I was trying to have it build me a iOS app to do something, and it couldn't get it built. It kept failing on the build, and eventually decided that the problem was that things weren't installed, even though it was running those commands. So it was ready to delete the system directory of my Xcode CLI installs because that was the problem. And it's just not, it's a little bit smarter now. So it's not doing that to me anymore. I haven't had it try to remove or get so confused down a rabbit hole that it's ready to delete stuff. And so I think we've all gotten a little bit more comfortable with YOLO mode, but also at the same time, it's not perfect, and it would be. I now realize that for me, the next concern is as I get back into consulting and touching production infrastructure on occasion, that I'm going to have a whole different posture for what I give my local AI, because realizing that it has access to every single CLI tool that I've already authed with is almost on the level of security nightmare. And I think I need a new paradigm shift in how I'm going to design my local editing and tooling to segment the human involvement and the human access from the AI access. So it looks like Docker is going to be one of those major players that are playing in that space, and I'm excited for it because it turns out I know a little thing about Docker, and I'm excited to make some videos on that. So hopefully we'll have you back on in the future, and maybe this will inspire me to make some more Docker videos about how to use Docker with AI. All right.
Absolutely.
Where can people find you? You're on what? LinkedIn?
I'm on LinkedIn. Probably that's going to be the easiest to get me. I'm technically on X and Blue Sky and all that kind of stuff. Probably LinkedIn's the best though. So.
Yeah. So follow Michael Irwin on LinkedIn. Are you speaking at conferences? Do you have any conferences coming up that you're going to be at?
I'm doing a couple of meetups in New York City and Boston next month. But then I'm going to be taking a little bit of time off from traveling because we've got another kiddo arriving in May. And so not going to be traveling because I want to stay married and dad. So,
Nice. Probably the right call. I would suspect. So congratulations. I'm excited for y'all once again. And you and I will have to meet at a conference in the future post birth, and you'll show me some more kid pictures, and we will hang out again. And thanks for watching DevOps and Docker Talk. We're going to be back next week. I do not remember the guest. But if you not watched these before, this is live streamed every Thursday at the same time, and then it comes out on a podcast. And if you don't know what those podcasts are, go watch the beginning of the episode because that's where we talked about all that.
It was there.
Thanks again, Michael, and we'll all see you next week. Ciao.
All right, thanks, Bret. Thanks all.